Hey guys, welcome back to yet another impressions video on the latest game I completed, which is Immortals Fenyx Rising. I decided to play this on Stadia just because at the time of purchase I did not own a Xbox Series X or a PlayStation 5. So I wanted to get the best game or the best, I guess, performance out of this game. Even though this game is definitely not a the most high tech game out there in terms of graphics and whatnot. I decided to purchase it on Stadia, and it worked remarkably well. And throughout the video, I'll share some of my thoughts in terms of graphics and whatnot. Very easy to purchase, and the streaming was worked flawlessly. It's almost like I never noticed I was streaming a game, which was a pretty cool experience. But focusing on the game, Immortals Fenyx Rising was a very pleasant surprise. Based on the very few videos that I watched and the very few impressions that I read online, I thought I was gonna like the game. So I pulled the trigger. I think the game was on sale during Christmas week, on the Stadia service. So I figured, let me just buy this, try it out, and see what happens. You guys know me. I'm a pretty big fan of the Legend of Zelda games, Breath of the Wild specifically. And this game drew a lot of comparisons to Breath of the Wild, for better or worse. And yes, there are some similarities. In a way, you can. I guess the best way to describe this game is it's a combination of Breath of the Wild and Assassin's Creed, specifically Odyssey. If you guys have played that particular game, and in fact, I think the development studio at Ubisoft that developed Assassin's Creed Odyssey is the team that developed Fenyx Rising, which is no surprise. With the bigger difference being Fenyx Rising has more of a fantasy setting, whereas Assassin's Creed obviously is a more realistic setting. But overall, I think that mashup formula of Zelda and Assassin's Creed actually worked pretty well for this game. I ended up liking it a lot. I know there are some, it's very hard to please the hardcore Legend of Zelda fans. They're very serious about the Zelda series, and of course, so a lot of people didn't like this game. I think that Fenyx Rising, while it may not be better than Breath of the Wild, which is something very hard because it's one of those generation-defining games. I think this game was extremely fun, and in fact, I think there are some things that Fenyx Rising does better than Breath of the Wild, namely the combat system. I didn't have a huge complaint from Breath of the Wild, when it came out in terms of the weapon, weapons breaking and things like that. So this game doesn't have that mechanic. It didn't bother me in Breath of the Wild, but at the same time, I think a conventional, non-breaking weapon system would have been nice, in that game. And this one definitely has that, system where your weapons don't break. So that's a plus that this game does, in my opinion. But let's focus step by step. In terms of the story, I really enjoyed the story. I really enjoy the way this game sets the story up. It's basically a narrative or a narration by two of the gods, namely Zeus and Prometheus, I believe. In the game, they basically talk to each other, and they narrate the story of this mortal, warriors or soldier called Phoenix, and that's when the game starts. And you have to create your character. You can be a male or a female. You have a wide variety of hairstyles and skin tones and whatnot. So your character is custom created, but other than that, the story it's told through a narrative, which I thought it was pretty. It was pretty cool. The game tries to be, I guess, funny in terms of dialogue and the story. Some of the lines are pretty cheesy and cringy, at certain points. But overall, I really enjoyed the humor in the game, even though I wasn't like laughing, throughout the game. It made me smile in a few areas, and I thought the voice acting and the dialogue was pretty good for the most part. And if you guys are familiar with Greek mythology, I think this is a game for you. I'm not an expert or anything like that, but I was able to obviously get some, catch some references. You have a lot of the, Greek gods, being used in the context of these games, such as Athena, Ares, Achilles, a lot of Greek mythology names and characters are obviously used and shown in this game, and that goes along with like the regular enemies. You see like mythical, I guess, creatures that are your enemies, and basically the story revolves around defeating this evil being Typhon, which he is basically controlling the isle of the island, or where the game takes place. And at the same time, you're trying to revert this curse that turned everyone into stone. So you have to like follow this prophecy, see if it falls through with your character, and then of course defeat the bad guy. And at the same time, you're trying to free up the four main gods of this universe in the game. So that's kind of like your objective. You have to visit different areas of the island, the four different areas, and you have some of the gods in there, or goddesses, like Athena, or Aphrodite, and other gods that you have to free. You get to earn their powers, and it's a pretty fun overall story, in my opinion, with some plot twists towards the end that I thought were pretty interesting and fun to partake. In terms of graphics, I played the Stadia version, and of course, Stadia is it's basically a souped-up PC or computer. It offers two modes. One of them is like the high definition mode, if you will, where you have a 4K resolution, but with only 30 frames for the frame rate. Or you could play like another mode where you have 1080 resolution, but at 60 frames per second. I decided to go with that mode. I'm turning into, like, if I had the choice, I'm turning into more of a frame rate type of guy, because I think I value more in terms of gameplay, just to have more fluidity on the screen. I think it helps a little bit more in terms of controlling your character, whether it's a platforming section or combat, like in this game where you have to dodge. I think having a higher frame rate definitely helps the experience. The resolution looked fine, even though it was only 1080, 1080p or whatever. I think the game looked as great as it could, because the game doesn't really have an outstanding graphical power. The game has this fantasy almost like cartoonish type of art direction that doesn't require a lot of firepower or horsepower in terms of the graphics. But I thought the graphics are very colorful, they're very they pop up a lot in terms of the saturation and the colors, and it's serviceable. This is definitely not the best looking game out there, and hence why I decided to go with the performance version at a higher frame rate. But other than that, the game looks pretty good in my opinion. Different areas of the world have different themes. You can go to the snow theme areas of the island. You can go to dry areas that have this orange theme throughout, and luster green areas and whatnot. They do get a little bit repetitive in terms of the overall, I guess nature and features. But at the same time, I can't complain too much. I think Breath of the Wild also was at fault for that. There were areas that looked very samey for a lot of time before you go to an interesting area. But overall, the graphics are pretty good, and I think are decent. And I think the character models have that cartoonish look to it that really doesn't require a lot of firepower. In terms of the soundtrack, I thought it was great. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed the soundtrack. It was great, actually. Like, I'm a big fan of the soundtrack of this game, and the voice acting. Again, even though some of the accents, they were a little bit suspect in terms of, it's supposed to be like a Greek type of accent. It was funny because in my stream, both Leo and Terry were saying, these guys sound more like a Russian type of accent or whatever. But I think I like the exaggeration in the voice acting. It almost has like a cartoon vibe and feel to it, which I thought it was pretty cool. But the voice acting in overall, like as far as the script, I thought it was pretty good. And again, it helps a lot because this game is narrated throughout the whole game, as almost as a storybook type of tale, if you will. So the sound in the game is, in my opinion, one of the strongest points. Both the soundtrack and the voice, dialogue, and script. Now, finally, to talk about the gameplay, this is an area where I already kind of briefly mentioned that this game shines in the sense that the combat system is pretty well done, in my opinion, in terms of your weapons don't break. You have light attacks, you have strong attacks. You can also use a bow and arrow to shoot from afar. You can also opt for a sneaking or stealth, mechanics to surprise the enemies and deal more damage. You have, special power-ups or special moves that you can upgrade and use to your advantage. I really enjoyed the mechanic of using your, at one point in the game, kind of like early in the game, you unlock a bird partner that fights with you, and once you unlock some of his special skills, I think the game becomes very, very easy, especially if you know which skills to power up early in the game. I think they are very good, and a combination of those special skills that you upgrade not only for the bird that it's your companion in the game, but also for your own character. And on top of that, you can get new weapons that have different effects, armor pieces that have different effects. You can get chest pieces, you can get a helmet, different rates of defense and different perks. Some armors, they may replenish health, for example, if you successfully land a couple of combos, and things like that. There's also a dodge mechanic, kind of like a Dark Souls-esque, where you can dodge at the last second and activate this, an opening for the enemy. I found that to be a little bit inaccurate, and I don't think it was the fault of me playing in Stadia. There was not a lag or latency issue per se. I think it was more of a very weird timing issue where I found that your dodges had to be done fairly early as opposed to fairly late, which kind of threw me off because I was, even though I was dodging the attacks, they were so late that the slow motion perk was not activated most of the time, and that kind of messed me up a little bit in terms of timing. But other than that, it's a very important feature. But as I mentioned, the more you progress through this game, the enemies become very harder. It's an open-ended, open-world Ubisoft game. It's a perfect open-world Ubisoft game in the sense that you have to go to like these high points and towers and monuments, to unlock like the map. You can see all the milestone areas. So if you guys hate or love the Ubisoft mechanics, just be warned that this is a very traditional Ubisoft open world game in that sense. And similarly to Breath of the Wild, you have your stamina meter. There are areas where there are very high mountains, and you can see there's some sort of power up at the top of the mountain. But once you start climbing, you may not have enough stamina to get there. And of course, in the game, you can either upgrade your stamina, or you can have potions that can help you, replenish your stamina as you're climbing the mountains and whatnot. But the game does, it's very well spread out, in my opinion, in terms of the power-ups, collecting. And I guess where the game shines, or it can be a deal... It could be both a good or bad thing, is the vaults, which are the equivalent of the shrines in Breath of the Wild. That's where most of your puzzles are going to be done. And I was having a lot of fun with the vaults. In fact, early in the game, I was purposely looking for vaults because I thought the puzzles were fairly well done. For the most part, they're simple. I didn't have major problems much at all in the game, in the 40 hours that I put in this game. Solving the puzzles, but I did find it became a little bit cumbersome towards the end of the game, where I just wanted to kind of like beat the game, and some of those vaults at the end of the game are mandatory, and not only that, but the puzzle sections are very long. And so I was in this mentality towards the end of the game. I was just already getting tired, and I just wanted the game to be done with. And unfortunately, those vaults were long, and a lot of the puzzles involve pushing boxes or using physics to move objects and things like that. So they are slow in nature. So just be warned that this game can get tiring somewhat quickly in terms of the puzzle solving, which is a shame because I thought there was a lot of good creativity behind the puzzles. It's just that I think I got burnt out towards the end from doing a lot of them because I have this problem with open world games where I cannot focus on just the story, which in my opinion is a good thing. I'm always looking for the side quests. I'm always looking for the side missions. And while I don't necessarily 100% these games, more often than not, I do get sidetracked a lot, and every time I play an open world like this, I end up doing most of the missions by the time I beat the game. And I want to say I did beat a fair amount of vaults and side quests and side missions and Phoenix Rising to the point that once I wanted to finish the game, I was a little bit burnt out in terms of all the side content. But other than that, I thought the game was great. A lot of variety in terms of the side missions and puzzles. You have missions where you test your bow and arrow skills. Some puzzles, the vaults. Some of them are kind of like arenas where you play like boss type of enemies. The combat system again was a very fun, and the exploration, while it wasn't top notch in terms of finding new areas and whatnot, it was enjoyable because you can. Once you unlock some of your flying or hovering abilities, if you will, it becomes very interesting exploring the island. A little bit on the slow side. You do have warp areas or zones, which obviously help a lot, and you can also like have horses, which I thought it was kind of unnecessary in this game. I found myself doing most everything by foot or by climbing, manually. And warping through areas if I was very far away from one point to another. But overall, I was very surprised, very pleased with Immortals Fenyx Rising. As a Legend of Zelda fan and Breath of the Wild fan, I give this game, flying passing scores. I think I had a lot of fun with this game, and it gets my full recommendation if you guys are into Zelda or Assassin's Creed games. I think this game has a good balance of both, and it was a very enjoyable experiences, and one of the sleeper hits of 2020, because I think this game doesn't get as much recognition as, in my opinion, it should be getting. So take that with whatever it is. But other than that, that's it for now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all later.